You probably think innovation lives in Silicon Valley, that the best infrastructure comes from billion-dollar government programs. That real progress needs advanced machines, elite universities, and consultants in suits. But what if I told you, a forgotten nation in West Africa, one of the poorest on Earth, is quietly building roads that last longer, cost less, and perform better than many highways in the United States? And they're doing it with garbage, actual trash, old, discarded tires that most countries burn or dump in rivers. In Burkina Faso, they've become the backbone of a national transformation. Now I know what you're thinking. That's impossible. That's unsustainable. That's just a PR stunt. But wait, because once you see what's happening on the ground, you might start to question everything you thought you knew about development, technology, and who really leads the future. So before you scroll away, ask yourself this. If a country with almost nothing can pull this off, what excuse does the rest of the world have? Burkina Faso, a name that rarely trends, rarely makes headlines, and almost never enters global conversations about innovation or progress. Most people couldn't point to it on a map. To many, it's just one more landlocked, impoverished country in Africa. Another place burdened by debt, drought, and dependency. And for years, that narrative held. Let's be honest. To the outside world, Burkina Faso was a footnote. Not a player, not a leader. The kind of country that's talked about in donor meetings, not in tech conferences. The kind of place we send aid to, not ideas from. But behind that silence was a harsh reality. The nation's roads were collapsing. Entire villages vanished from access during the rainy season. A storm wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a shutdown. Kids couldn't reach school. Pregnant women couldn't reach clinics. Farmers watched their produce rot because there was no way to transport it. Infrastructure wasn't just bad, it was dangerous. And the worst part? No one was coming to help. Development loans brought debt, not solutions. Consultants came and left. Reports were written. Nothing changed. Just more mud, more stuck trucks, more waiting. But here's the thing. How long can a nation sit still before it says, enough? What happens when the people you overlooked start doing the unthinkable? Not with funding from the World Bank, not with billion-dollar contracts, but with trash, with their own hands, with a mindset that says, we don't demand permission to build. This is where the story really begins. In early 22, Burkina Faso was facing another crisis, one that looked no different from all the ones before it. Rising fuel prices, food insecurity, the rainy season looming with its usual threat of cutting off entire provinces from the rest of the country. But something else was brewing beneath the surface. A shift. A change not in budget, but in mindset. Ibrahim Traoré, a young military captain turned transitional leader, took power amidst political unrest and public frustration. Most leaders in his position would have turned to the usual script: ask for more aid, renegotiate loans, promise reforms, blame history. But Traoré asked a different question. What if the solution was already here? That single question rewrote the entire development model. Instead of asking what Burkina Faso lacked, he asked what it had, right now in its hands, in its streets, in its junkyards. And that's when he saw them. Tires. Piles of old, worn-out tires dumped across cities and roadsides. They were everywhere, useless, toxic, often burned in open fields or dumped in rivers. Each year, Burkina Faso generated more than 200,000 waste tires and imported thousands more as second-hand vehicles rolled in from abroad. Globally, over 1.5 billion tires are discarded annually, with only about 30% recycled or repurposed. The rest end up in landfills, creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes, releasing toxic fumes when burned, and taking up to 1,000 years to decompose. But where the world saw garbage, Traoré saw infrastructure. The tires weren't the problem. They were the raw material. So the next question came fast and simple. Why are we importing road-building materials we can't afford when we're sitting on a mountain of rubber? That question sparked a movement. It wasn't about roads anymore. It was about agency, ownership, reclaiming a future that didn't rely on anyone else showing up. And it all started with something most people wouldn't stop to notice: a scrap tire lying in the dirt. It began quietly. No fanfare, no press conferences, just a group of engineers, workers, and volunteers gathering discarded tires from alleys, garages, and roadsides. People thought it was a cleanup campaign. But it wasn't. It was construction. Instead of sourcing expensive asphalt or importing bitumen, both priced in foreign currency, Traoré's team devised a new method: lay tires as the foundational grid of the roadbed. Not randomly, but in precise patterns, each tire placed like a puzzle piece. Then came the binder, a specially formulated concrete blend designed to integrate with rubber, hold under pressure, and resist the extremes of West Africa's climate: brutal sun, torrential rain, and wide temperature swings. The result was a road that flexed instead of cracked, a surface that absorbed the weight of trucks without splintering, a foundation that literally bounced back. On average, these roads cost up to 40% less to build than conventional ones, but more importantly, they lasted longer. While traditional asphalt begins to degrade after just 3 to 5 years in the region, the first tire-based test sections showed minimal wear after 7+ years, even under heavy usage. And they weren't just cheaper, they were safer. Rubber naturally absorbs shock and vibration. That meant less stress on vehicles, fewer maintenance costs for drivers, and reduced noise in dense urban areas. The roads were even found to be more resistant to seismic activity, a major benefit in regions with ground instability. Skeptics dismissed it as a publicity stunt, until it started working. Truckers changed routes to use the tire roads. Ambulances cut their response time in half. Farmers reached markets before their produce spoiled. It wasn't innovation in the way the world usually defines it. No patents, no Silicon Valley VC funding, no glossy TED Talk. But it worked. And every mile paved wasn't just a road. It was a message. We can build. We don't need to wait for permission. We don't need your blueprint. We have our own. Burkina Faso used to have roads that disappeared with the rain, literally. You could map a highway in the dry season and then watch it vanish into mud 2 months later. People didn't travel between villages. They endured it. Kids walked barefoot through flood-soaked trails just to get to school. Ambulances got stuck in the middle of nowhere, wheels spinning helplessly in the sludge. If someone needed urgent care during the rainy season, good luck. You either prayed or you waited, and sometimes you buried. Then the tires came, and it was like someone flipped a switch. Those black, round, worthless things, once dumped on the side of the road, were now the road, and they held. Travel times didn't just shrink, they collapsed. 5-hour trips became 90-minute drives. Motorbikes zipped through places that used to swallow 4x4s. For the first time, entire regions felt connected, not just physically, but emotionally. Because when the road works, people feel seen. Fire trucks started showing up. So did mobile clinics. School buses ran routes that had been impossible for years. Farmers brought their vegetables to market before they rotted. Pregnant women reached hospitals before contractions turned critical. This wasn't some government ribbon-cutting stunt. No speeches, no gold shovels. Just rubber and grit. And something else: respect. Because after years of hearing "next year," people finally saw results. Not aid, not theory, just road under their feet. That changes how a country breathes. Because when you can move, everything else follows. At first, people thought it was charity. Just another public works gig that would dry up when the press lost interest. But then the money started moving, And it wasn't going back to foreign contractors this time. See, every tire in those roads? Someone picked it up. Someone cleaned it, sorted it, transported it, placed it. And for each step, someone got paid. What started as a fix for failing infrastructure turned into an entirely new economy. Local job creation exploded. Young men who used to sit jobless at tea stalls were now hauling tires by the truckload. Mechanics, welders, builders, people who'd never worked on anything official, suddenly found themselves part of a national project, and not just as labor, as builders of their own country. It wasn't glamorous work, it wasn't posted on LinkedIn, but it was steady, and for the first time, many communities were seeing something they hadn't seen in years: cash flow that stayed local. Think about this. Most developing countries import nearly all their road-building materials: bitumen, heavy equipment, even skilled labor. The money flows out. The debt piles up. The roads crack in 5 years. Then they repeat the cycle. But in Burkina Faso, the money stayed in circulation. The tires were already here. The labor was homegrown. And the knowledge? That spread fast. Some towns even started setting up their own tire collection hubs. Mini ecosystems that turned waste into wages. No outside help, no million-dollar grants, just rubber, sweat, and a whole lot of pride. It wasn't just roads that were being built. It was dignity. And no, you can't measure that in GDP. But try taking it away, and you'll see exactly how valuable it is. You know what's funny? When innovation comes out of MIT or Google, we call it genius. When it comes out of a dusty mechanic's garage in West Africa, we call it luck. But luck doesn't explain what happened next. Once the roads started working, local engineers, many without formal degrees, didn't stop there. They poked, tested, tweaked. Some began stuffing the hollow cores of tires with sand, gravel, even shredded plastic waste. The result? Roads that were even more solid, more insulated, more weather-resistant. And they didn't wait for research grants or foreign approval. They just tried stuff. If it failed, they fixed it. If it worked, they doubled down. That's not randomness. That's applied intelligence. In one district, a young technician figured out how to compress tires tighter before laying them, which reduced concrete use by 18%. In another, a team built drainage grooves directly into the roadbed to stop erosion during flash floods. None of this came from official government blueprints. No foreign consultants, no expensive software simulations, just real-world trial, error, and results. The roads started lasting longer. Villages began requesting them. And suddenly this tire thing wasn't just a stopgap. It was a system that got smarter with every kilometer. Ask yourself, when was the last time a national project got better the more people touched it? That's what happens when you stop treating people like recipients of development and start treating them like the drivers of it. It didn't take long for the ripple effect to kick in. Word travels fast in West Africa, not through press releases, but through truckers, traders, and WhatsApp groups. And when drivers from Mali or Niger started taking detours just to use Burkina Faso's tire roads, people noticed. Delegations began to show up. Engineers from Chad, urban planners from Togo. Even skeptical policymakers who once laughed off the idea of rubber roads started asking for meetings. Because here's the thing about proof. It spreads faster than theory. You can argue with a PowerPoint. You can't argue with a road that hasn't cracked in 6 rainy seasons. By late 2023, at least 3 neighboring countries had launched pilot programs modeled on the Burkinabe design. Not some top-down replica. No. They adapted it, made it local, tweaked the mix to suit their soil and climate. That's the magic. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all export. It was an idea that invited mutation. Even in Europe, environmental organizations began citing Burkina Faso as a case study in large-scale rubber upcycling. Not for humanitarian reasons, purely for performance. In France, one report from the Institut National de l'Économie Circulaire called the model a technically sound, cost-efficient solution for low-traffic rural zones. In other words, this could work anywhere. Which begs the question, why did it have to come from the so-called bottom? Maybe because people at the top have too much to lose. Too many contracts, too many middlemen, too many systems built to preserve the problem instead of solving it. But when you've got nothing to lose, sometimes you're free to try the things no one else dares to. And that's when innovation stops being optional and becomes inevitable. Ask any farmer in Burkina Faso what they fear most. And it's not war, it's the sky. Because here, the rains are everything. And when they don't come, on time, in quantity, entire harvests vanish. For decades, agriculture in this country was a gamble. You planted seeds, crossed your fingers, and hoped the clouds showed up. If they didn't, you tried again next year, a little poorer, a little more desperate, until someone asked, "What if we stopped waiting?" That's how the artificial canal system began. Not as some UN development plan, but as a simple question. Can we store the water we already have? Instead of watching rain rush off into rivers and out of the country, the Burkinabe started capturing it. They dug trenches, carved channels, built modest reservoirs, not with high-tech dams, but with grit and geometry. During the rainy season, they collected runoff from fields, roads, even rooftops. During the dry season, that same water was redirected through a network of canals to thirsty farmland. Within 2 growing cycles, the results were impossible to ignore. Land that used to crack under the sun turned green. Not just crops, but trees, fish ponds, grazing zones. Communities once dependent on food aid began growing surplus. For the first time, some talked about exporting. And again, this wasn't driven by donors or big infrastructure firms. It was local labor, local logic, local need. The kind of solution you build when you're done asking for help and start helping yourself. Satellite images from 2021 to 2024 show entire districts going from brown to green. Not because the climate changed, because the mindset did. And when your fields bloom in the middle of a drought, people stop asking if it works. They start asking how soon they can do it too. You know what's harder than building roads in a country without resources? Building electricity without a grid. For most of Burkina Faso's rural population, power was never a given. Entire towns lived by candlelight. Hospitals relied on diesel generators, if they had them at all. Students studied under kerosene fumes. Businesses shut down after sunset. The solution? It wasn't waiting for foreign investment to build a national grid. That would take decades and billions. Instead, the plan flipped the model. Build a city that doesn't need the grid at all. Traoré's government launched what they call the Solar City Initiative, a decentralized urban project powered entirely by the sun. Every building, every classroom, every clinic, all of it off-grid, solar-powered, and designed from day one to be energy independent. The homes? Panels on every rooftop. The schools? Solar labs teaching kids not just how to use tech, but how to build it. The buses? Electric, locally assembled, running on sun-soaked batteries. And they didn't just stop at electricity. The internet is free in designated zones, powered by solar repeaters. Public lighting? Also solar. Water pumps? Solar-driven. For a country once considered energy poor, this wasn't just infrastructure. It was a declaration. And perhaps the most radical part, instead of importing all the tech, Burkina Faso began building capacity to manufacture and repair solar hardware locally. Panels were assembled in-country. Battery maintenance workshops trained local youth. It's not perfect. There are setbacks, shortages, bugs, but it's happening. Imagine this. Kids who used to read by candlelight now learning how photovoltaic cells work. under LED lights powered by the same sun that once beat down on their tin roofs. You don't need to wait for progress to be handed down. You can generate it yourself. One panel, one student, one city at a time. Let's get something clear. This isn't about roads, or tires, or solar panels. This is about a country that changed the question from how do we catch up to why do we have to follow? For decades, development was a script. Poor countries were told, follow these steps, take these loans, hire these experts, wait your turn, hope for growth. Maybe, if the math worked out, you'd get a highway, a hospital, a grid. Burkina Faso didn't just throw out the script. They tore it up, wrote something else, and handed it back. And what makes it revolutionary isn't the technology, it's the thinking. Because once you stop asking for help, you start asking better questions. Once you stop imitating, you start inventing. And once you stop accepting limitations as facts, you start treating them as puzzles. That mindset of working with what you have, not what you wish you had, is what changed everything. It's why they used waste instead of imports, why they stored rain instead of begging for irrigation, why they chose solar instead of waiting for wires. And it's spreading, not as a model to copy, but as a challenge to rethink what development even means. Maybe it's not glass skyscrapers and mega projects. Maybe it's a kid riding a bike down a tire-paved road to a school powered by the sun. Maybe it's a nation that stopped apologizing for being poor and started building like it had nothing to prove. So here's the uncomfortable truth. If Burkina Faso can do this with trash, runoff, and sunlight, what's stopping everyone else?